Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to download a file from your server. So something that you user might have uploaded from their client side and then saved it to your backend. And then I'm going to show you how we can retrieve that file from the backend and then let the user save it. So let me just show you guys a quick demo here. I'm going to go ahead and upload a small image. I'm going to do this one of my dog. Okay, so now it's been uploaded. So now I'm going to try and download it. So if you see here, I was able to download it and it gave me a little toast saying download successful. And yep, I got a picture of my dog. Yeah, that's what we're going to do in this tutorial. So let's jump into VS Code and let's get started. Hey guys, I have my GitHub repository open here. If you guys have not followed along with my last two videos where I have showed you how to upload a file and then also upload a large file, if you guys are interested, you can watch those videos, of course. And if you want to just follow this video where you just download a file, I'm going to go ahead and clone this repo because it has the base setup already for me, where it has all the DB tables kind of set up and everything for me done in the back end and front end, all the React stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and clone this. And you guys, if you want to follow along, you guys can clone it with me. So I'm in my desktop directory here, and I just have git bash open here, and I'm just going to do git clone shift insert, and then it's just going to clone into this directory called upload large file, and I'm going to go ahead and rename that to download file, and then whatever code I have in here, I will push that to another repository for you guys to download if you guys want. So I'm going to close that, or actually I'm going to change this to download file. Okay, cool. So I can just cd into that. So download file, and then I'm going to just do code dot, and then that's going to open in VS Code. Let me bring that here. All right, so now what we're going to need to do is I'm going to close out of git bash. I'm going to open it in VS Code. We need to install all the packages. So let's do the client side first. So I'm going to cd into the client side folder, and then I'm going to just do npm install, and this is going to install all of our dependencies. So I'm going to fast forward through this, and then we'll get onto the server side. Okay, so I have all of my client side packages installed. I'm going to go over to the server side, and let's install all of these packages. So I'm going to just cd out of the client side and then go to server and just do npm install. All right, so while that is running, I'm going to talk about what we're going to do. And maybe if you guys are watching this for the first time, then, let's go over the architecture setup basically. So the first thing we need to do is actually create a image folder. I call it image, but really you can upload anything with this setup, videos, whatever, documents, anything. So let's go over to the client side. In the components, we have this file upload component, okay? And, let me go ahead and start a server so that it's easier to explain. So if we go to the package.json, I have a script here that we can run called npm run dev that we can run. So npm run dev, this will start up the server for us, and I'm just going to put this side by side. All right. Oh, actually this is already have one kind of open from previously, so let's go over that. Let's go over this file upload component. So what you see here is what this is outputting basically. And then whenever I choose a file, it will basically upload the file to the backend, and I have a route set up to the backend. If you go to app.ts, and by the way, this is all written in TypeScript, so just fair warning there. And did I get some? Oh, I do need to do one more thing, guys. We will do this together. We need to create a .env file. So let's do that in the server side. So let's just do .env. And let me open up my Notion real fast. I have all my DB details saved in a note so that I don't have to go and remember what I have saved in my SQL Workbench. So I have my dev notes here in Notion that I use, and I just have my .env stuff saved so that I don't have to, pull it. I can just pull it up every time. And I'm just going to paste that here. What is next? So we should have a db.ts, so perfect. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this, and it should have, let's see, it should say db connected, but is it? Yep, DB is connected. Perfect. So now we have the DB connected. Let me go ahead and, explain this to anyone that hasn't watched the previous tutorials. So I have two routes set up here for uploading a file and then for creating a file upload session. I'm not going to explain what this one is for, but basically this will be able to upload large files and also small files. The upload file will actually, save the file to the backend in this image directory. And also the DB structure that we have set up here is we have two tables. The one that we care about in this tutorial is the uploaded file table, which will contain our unique file name, which will let us grab the file path that we need to be able to download this. All right, so we're just going to have a simple list here below for all the files that we have downloaded, and uploaded, and then we'll be able to download those by clicking on them. So I'm going to exit out of this. All right, so the first thing we want to do is when I have uploaded a file, I want to be able to get the list of files. So let's create the component for that, and I'm going to create it here. I'm going to call this file list.tsx. Okay, so in the file list.tsx, I'm going to first let's create the function. And right now we will have some props, but we'll leave it as that for now. And then we will just do return that, and then we're going to do an export default file list. Okay, so right now I'm going to import some components from Chakra UI. Chakra UI. Okay, so I'm going to import the flex component, and yeah, that should be it for now. So the flex component will just be our wrapper component. So inside of here, we're going to basically have the list of the files. So let's have a text component. Oh, I have caps lock on, and let me go ahead and import it here. Okay, and this is just going to say uploaded files. This is some really bad UI, guys, so if you guys can think of a better UI to show the list of files, I would highly appreciate it if you shared it with me. All right, so that's going to be there, and let's go ahead. Okay, let's just leave this empty because TypeScript doesn't like that I have that right now. And let's go ahead and import this in the main so that you guys can see what is going on. File list. And I'm using this extension called tab 9. I just wanted to try it out and see how that worked. With TypeScript, though, it kind of seems unnecessary. Yeah, especially on the JavaScript side. I mean, the TypeScript side, yeah, for VS Code, since it's so compatible. And what am I doing here? I'm going to place okay, so I'm going to do this. File list. All right, so what we need to fix some of this centering here. So I'm going to import the box element box component, I should say. And what we're going to do is wrap some of the file upload component and the file list component into the box component. And we're going to give this a margin so that it will be centered. And we're going to reduce the width. I'm pretty much taking this from the file upload, and then I'm going to place it here so that file upload won't have its own centering. And sorry, not like that. It should be like this. Okay. And let me open up file upload. So if you see in the file upload component, we have this here. We don't need this. Let's go ahead and remove that. Perfect. Perfect. Now, let's go ahead and add another box. And let's put file upload in here so that we can give this a margin bottom of 10. So that way we scoot that down. And then let's go ahead and center align this. So we're going to center pretty much everything in the file list. So what we can do, luckily with Flex, is use the direction column and then justify. We can do center. Okay, and then also we need to do align items center. Perfect. So then now everything that goes inside this Flex component will be aligned in the center and also justified as well. And it will be stacked on top of each other. So now I'm going to import the unordered list. And what we'll do is eventually just loop through all the files. We're going to have to make an API call for that, but we'll set that up after. So right now we will just have like some dummy data. So we're going to have a list item, and then we're going to also have a link component, which is pretty much like the A tag. All right, so we're going to have the list item. And then inside the list item, we would render this link. And this link will have a color of blue.400. Okay, and I believe it doesn't self-close like this because we can place text in between. And we'll actually put the file name here. We'll just put a placeholder so it'll look something like that. And we're going to, let's see, let's do a margin. Well, actually, no, not here. Let's do a margin bottom on the text of 4. And then let's make this a little bit bigger. So font size 2XL. Cool. We have the link, it's clickable, and now we'll just need to have a on-click event. So what we're going to do here is just say handle file download. And basically right now we won't accept any params. And then we'll just say on-click. And for now we'll just have it like this because we really don't know what we're going to be working with right now. So handle file download. Okay, so that's our list. So now we need to create an API call here. When this list gets mounted, file list component, we need to make a API call and a use effect. So I'm going to go ahead and import that from React. And I'm also going to import, let's see here. I'm going to import the use state also, so that we can save the file list in our component. All right. So I'm going to come down here. Whoops, not here. And also, I don't know why I placed that out there. I'm going to place it in here. Okay, so let's create the use state. This is just going to be an array. And then inside the array, we'll actually have an object. So it'll be an array of objects. The file ID will be there'll be a file ID and a file name. Cool. And then here we'll say file list and set file list. All right. Now let's have our use effect. So we'll have the use effect. And then for the dependency array, it'll be just empty for now. We'll probably need to change that in after. And then I'm going to have a fetch call. So I know we haven't set up the backend, so let's wait on that. I think it's time that we make the backend call to get the files. But first, what we're going to do here, since file list is an array, I'm going to say file list.length. If it's equal to 0, then I'm just going to return null. And then, yeah, that should be it. All right, so now it only render if there's a file list, if there's an array of objects inside the file list. So now let's go to our backend. Let me close out of this client side, and let me give us some more real estate on the VS Code side. So we need to create a new route here, and this is going to be for actually downloading the file. So, sorry, not download. Well, we will create one for downloading the file, but we will need one for getting all the files. So if we come here and let's do app.get, and then let's just call this get files. All right, and then here I'm going to say upload.none because we're using a library called Multer, and it's good that we specify in every route that we're not, whether we're expecting a file or not. All right, and then let's go into our file controller, and I'm going to come down here at the bottom and create a new method that's async and call this get files. This will expect a request of, let me see, is it express.request. And then a response of that. Let's wrap this in try-catch blocks. And let's do the error here. And then let's do response.json. Success is false. Message. Error. Retrieving files. All right. So now in the try, we need to create a new service. So here we have a bunch of services for uploading and all that. I want to create one for retrieving the file. So I'm just going to call this file retrieval service. Okay, so inside here, what we're going to do is we're going to need to connect to a repo. So I'm going to create a new repo here. File retrieval repo. Now, since it's all connecting to the same table, honestly, you could have all the queries in one repo, but instead of loading up one repo, it's better to separate them in different classes for what you need so that it's smaller and more reusable. All right, so inside the repo, the first thing we're going to do is let's make the query call. So let's create a class here called file retrieval repo. And then inside this class, let's go ahead and first export this. Let's do a static method here, get instance. Ooh, this tab 9 is actually really handy. file retrieval repo, and let instance, I'm going to just say null, and then I'm going to give this a type of null or file retrieval repo. And then also I'm going to import the connection from the DB. Cool. So we have the connection, and then we have the instance. So what we would do here is say get instance, and this will always return us the instance or create it if it's the first time and there isn't an instance created. So the best way you can do this and then just return the instance. All right, so I'm going to create a method here, async find files, and this will just return a promise array of objects. And then inside the object, we will just have the file ID and the file name. As you saw on the front end, that's what we'll be passing it. All right, so we can have a try catch block here. And then we'll just return an array. Here we're going to say, we're going to create a new response. So we're going to await the response. And then in here we will do the query. So I'm going to have a selects array. And then I'm going to just do file ID. So I'm just grabbing these details from my backend, which is this table here, uploaded file. So file ID and file unique file name. Oh, sorry, file ID and file name. Cool. And then we can have the connection here. So inside the connection, I'm going to have backticks. I'm going to do select, and then I'm going to do here using the template string, add the selects, and then do a join, and then separate it by a comma, so that I don't have to explicitly write it out myself, but in the array I will. So the array will just join into a string. It's much easier to write it in the array than it is in the string itself. So it's going to be select from uploaded file, where, well, there won't be any where condition. We're just going to do a straight select. There won't be anything in the array, and then we can expect an error or results. And then if we get an error back, let's go ahead and console.log the error. Otherwise, let's reject and return just an array. And then we will resolve this by returning results. Cool. So now in the file, so the query is done. This will return us an array of objects if there's a file uploaded. Otherwise, it will just return us an empty array, which this should also be an empty array, hopefully. Okay, so now in here, let's go ahead and import the file retrieval repo. From repository, file retrieval repo, and then let's go ahead and also do the same thing here. Create a class called file retrieval service. Okay, so in this we will also create a single instance of it. Yeah. So this will be null. Cool. And then I'm going to just do static get instance. Alright, so now I'm going to say if instance is equal to null, I will... Oh, this is really cool. Tab 9 is really doing all of this for me. That saves some time, actually. For those of you who are not familiar, it's just like AI that will go through, I guess, how you write your code, and based on that, do the auto completion. I think it's free to download. I'm going to do async find files, and pretty simple. Return await file retrieval repo dot find files. And I don't have to have any return type here because it's going to be known from the repo that this is what we can expect. All right, so now in the controller, let's go ahead and call this service. So let's import it. The file retrieval, okay, so let's do file retrieval service from, and then here we will say file response. Yeah, I guess files. Let's just do files. I like that better. Files is equal to await file retrieval service. No, wrong function. Find files. And there's no request. Cool. So now this will return the files, and we're going to just, if it's an empty array, there shouldn't be any issue. All right, so I can just say response.json success true, and then files will be, yep, like that. Now there's one thing I guess we should consider. Okay, so here, let me just do this. Get files. Is that the right? Yep. And it doesn't like something here. Maybe. Did I export this? No, I didn't. File retrieval service dot get instance. If you see here, this return array, I don't know if this is probably the best thing to do. We could probably return false and then, let the user know that there's an error retrieving the files. It's up to you guys how you want to implement it. I'm just going to leave it like this. All right. We get the files, so let's make this API call. So now we'll do a fetch call, and then it'll be HTTP localhost port 5000. And then this will be / get files. And the method should just be a get, so we shouldn't have to mess with that. Let's just go ahead and call this anyways. So then we can just do a dot then response.json. And if you guys prefer to use async await, feel free to do that. I'm just using the good old fetch here. So then this will have data, and then I'm going to just, I guess in the data we just need to do set file list, and the file list will just do data dot files. Cool. So now once we have the files, if the length is 0, then it'll not return anything. So yeah, let's give that a try, shall we? So right now I don't have any files uploaded. Let's go ahead and upload a file. I have some pictures of my dogs and then some thumbnails for my previous videos, just stuff that I've been messing with. So let's just upload a picture of my dog. So it's been uploaded. And okay, so one thing we need to work on is when you upload one, we need to basically re-render this component, which is the file list one. So let's go ahead and refresh the page. Oh, wow. That worked. Nope, well, we don't know if that worked. Let's see. Let's see if it's sending anything from the backend. Yep, it's making the API call. Nice. Now let's go ahead and render this in a loop. What we want to do here is just file list dot map. Okay, and then in here, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to use parentheses since we're returning directly. And then in here, since we're looping over the file list, we will get the file ID and the file name. Let's copy this and place it inside the method here. Okay, so then now this will be the actual file name, and then the handle file download will take in the file ID so that when it's time to download it, we will have that file ID to send to the backend. A way we can do that is have an inline method here and just do handle file upload download. I don't know why it does that. File download, file ID, and we'll be expecting a file ID of type number. And right now we won't do anything with it, and voila. And let's just have a console.log download file. Okay, and whenever I click on this, okay, so one thing we need to do here is like the golden rule of React. When you render components in a loop, you need to have a key. Okay, so I'm going to keep the key as file ID since it'll be unique always. And if I click on this, download file is clicked. Perfect. Let's handle that scenario where you upload a new file and it should re-render this component. So this one is, because of the way it's set up, I just kind of had to think of a easy, quick way. It's not the best way. I think at this point, since the components are having just a parent component, I have to create some state inside the main component, which I don't really like doing that. Since this is like the entry point, I don't want any shared state to be between any components, because when we add more components, it will cause unnecessary re-renders potentially. So with that being said, I think this would be a good case of Redux or some global state like that, manager like that. But for this tutorial, it's just overkill. We're just going to do use state. And now here, I'm just going to say, if there's a new file ID, so when we upload a file, I think the backend is returning a file ID. Let's just see. Their upload file. Yes, we will get a file ID back. So what we'll do is we'll pass that into the main by using a setter. So we're going to just say file ID. And every time you upload a file, this will be updated so that every time it will re-render the component. So now we need to pass in the file ID to the file list, and then we need to pass the set file ID method here. Okay, so let's fix that because TypeScript won't like that we're passing anything in. So we're just going to do props. Let's create an interface here. And I'm just going to call this props. And then this is just going to have a file ID of type number. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and destructure it. Okay, so now in our upload file method here that we have, we're calling this upload file method from the file service, and our response, So when the promise gets resolved, we will check here if the file is completely uploaded. It will go inside this else block. That's where we show the toast saying the file is uploaded. So what we will do here is, let's see, we will call the setter set file ID. Whoa. Sorry. This should not be file ID. This should be set file ID. And this is just going to be simply a method that returns void. Basically nothing. Okay. Okay, it doesn't like something. Dispatch set. Okay, so it is kind of more, it wants me to set it as this type. Dispatch, what is it? Dispatch set state action number. So I think I'm going to need to import that from React. Dispatch set state action. And then here, I'm going to set the type as dispatch set state action, which will be a type of number that we're going to set. Yeah. All right. So then here we will get the file ID. So the file ID will come in this response. If you see here, it has an interface that implements the upload file response. Okay, so we will expect the response to have the file ID, and if it doesn't, I guess we'll just do 0, because in the interface I have it set to optional, because it won't always be there until the last file block is uploaded, if we do upload it in chunks. So I will just use these double question marks that if this is null, then we'll just set it default to 0, but that should not be the case. Okay, so now we'll have the file ID, and then we'll pass the file ID here. Now, when we pass the file ID, let's go in here, have an interface, props, file ID. This will be simply a number. Okay. And then let's do props, file ID. Okay. So now the only time this component will get re-rendered is if this file ID gets updated. And the only time, yeah, that should be this use effect. Since the component will get re-rendered, this use effect should also get re-rendered. Let's try that out real fast. So where I think we might need to add it in the dependency. Oh, I'm confusing myself. Yeah, we will need to. Okay, so it will re-render it, but this use effect will only get called when the component is mounted. Since the component doesn't get unmounted here, the use effect won't be called again. I had confused myself. So this will be file ID. Every time this component gets re-rendered now, this use effect will get called. Because, sorry guys, every time the file ID gets updated, this use effect will get called and the component will get re-rendered. Let's try one more. Let's try another one. Cool, guys. Perfect. Now we get to the fun part. Let's get to the download file. So let's see what that looks like. Let's create a route here. All right, in app.ts. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have it taken a param of ID. So I'm going to say app.get, yep, download file. And I'm going to say : ID. And then of course here, upload.none, file controller dot download file, and I don't think that exists. Nope. So async download file request response. That's just too cool. Okay. So now let's see, what do we need to do inside here? First, we need to grab the file ID from the params, the request params. So we can just simply say request.params.id. Now let's see what the type of this is, if we need to typecast it to an integer. So I'm just going to do console.log file ID. Now I don't know if that will give us a string format or not. So maybe we can just do get type, I believe. Actually, I don't know. Type of. Yeah. Okay. And then here, let's just set up some try-catch blocks. Try-catch block. And let's kind of do the same thing here. So now, since we're expecting the file to be downloaded, we need to actually send the file contents back to the client side, and also update the headers in the browser, or sorry, in the response. The response will have some headers which will tell the browser, hey, download this thing. So download this, basically this file, right? So that's what will happen there. And for now, I'm just going to say response just have a success for now, because I just want to see what this type is. So now if let's make an API call now. Let's go back to file list. So in the file list, if the file is clicked, we will have let's create a service on the client side that will kind of, do all these things for us. So on the client side here, I'm going to create a service called file download service, and then file download service.ts. And these are just going to be methods. I'm not going to create a class here. So get file data. And then this is just going to return a promise. And we're just going to return a true or false, so that once we have the file data, that means, we've already downloaded it basically. And show a toast saying download successful or failed based on that. All right, so we're going to expect a file ID. And then I'm going to use async await instead of just using a promise with fetch. So file response await fetch HTTP localhost 5000 download file. And then here, okay, I'm going to use template strings. This will have the file ID as the param. All right. And then let's go ahead and export this. Let's just work with this right now, and let's just do return true. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Oh, well, I didn't actually make any changes here. So let's see what we got to do. Let's go ahead and import down here. I usually like to import all the library stuff at the top, and then anything else from other files I import afterwards. So get file data, service, file download service. This method, let's make this async. And then let's just do cons file download response await, and then get file data. Oh my goodness. File data, and then we'll pass in the file ID. All right, so that should make the API call. Cool, it is a string, and that is not what we want. So we're gonna do parse int on this. And if you guys watch my videos, you know I always like to include the validations. So I'm going to keep going with that to make this a complete tutorial. So I believe I have a validator for validating integers greater than 0. Perfect, that's what I want. And I believe I'm already using that here. So validate integer is what I need to use, which if you guys are interested, you can see how I implemented that. But I'm just going to go ahead and use that in here. So I'm going to say valid ID await validate integer. Whoops. And then if valid ID, this will return an object actually, is valid. If it's invalid, then we'll do return status. We're going to say bad request, which is a status of 400. Okay, so now success will be false, and then message will be invalid request. Cool. Now, let's see here. What's the next thing we need to do? We need to grab the file from the DB and then grab the file directory where the path is located here and retrieve the contents of that file, like the binaries. Okay, so first let's create a method inside the file retrieval service. And we can just come in here and say find file. We can do it by ID. So we can just say file ID number. And then here, what do we need to return? So we need to return, I'm going to make this private. So I'm not going to call this from the controller explicitly. This is actually a good method to I would probably keep it public because you never know what action method might need this. Sorry guys, so I'm not going to have this method. I'm going to just have a straight up download file method. Find the file from the DB and then, download it, basically return the file contents. Let's do it like that. I'm going to come down here and say async, the method, let's call this find file by ID. And then this will just take in the file ID. And then this will return a promise. And then this will, sorry, that's not the right syntax. Promise of type false. So we will return false here, or we will return a object containing the file name, which is not the file name that we're displaying here. This is actually the unique file name. This is how we identify this is how we identify the file name in our server. Okay, this is what the server cares about. This is how it's stored here. Cool. So then, and then also the file data. So this will return. So this is in the repo, right? Okay, sorry, this will just return the file name. Yeah, the unique file name. So I'm going to be more explicit here and just name this unique file name. And there is one more thing we need to return as well. We need to return the original file name that the user uploaded it as. And the reason why that is, I will explain that. Whenever we download the file, I want it to be called this. I don't want to expose the unique file name in this request. All right, so that's what we'll be naming it as. When we'll set that in the content headers. So now I'm gonna have a try catch. It doesn't like something. I missed something somewhere. Yep. Okay. It's just because I'm not returning anything yet. And then here we will do return await new promise, resolve, reject. Okay, and then here I'm going to do the same thing with the selects. Let's go ahead and copy this. Alright, so we will need the file name, and let's also grab the unique file name. Unique file name. And then let's write the query. Select using template strings. You guys know how it works. Alright, from uploaded file. Now we will have a where condition here where file ID is equal to question mark. And then we'll set that here. Okay. We'll have an error in results. If error, we're just going to reject false. And then let's console.log that. And then let's resolve the results. And we should be, it's going to be an array, right? So let's go ahead and just return the first one because we should be only expecting one file. And you know, one thing we could do is add this, a limit of 1, so that you know it won't ever return more than one thing. That kind of solidifies it. I think we can keep that in there. Hopefully it doesn't break anything. All right. So now I'm going to say file retrieval repo dot find file by ID, file ID. And then this will return a response, a false or the object. So if file response is equal to false, let's go ahead and return false. The next thing we'll do is return. Now we're going to check for the, I don't know, what is this? It will always return false since the types have false, have no overlap. Okay, whenever I access the other properties, it should go away. So now the next thing we want to check for is, does a file actually exist in our server? We don't want to try and download something that doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and create that method. If we come down here, let's make this private. Let's make this async. Check if file exist. File ID, which is wrong. We need the unique file name here. And then this will return a promise boolean. Okay. Now I will need a try catch block because we're going to use a built-in Node.js. What is it called? Method called access. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and import that. Import from, I believe it's file stream, yeah. Or there's actually, so there's two. There's file fs and then fs/promises. So I'm going to use promises and also the original one. So we need to have the constants that come from this because they don't belong in the promises, unfortunately. And I want to use access method here, which is an async one. I'm sorry, promise. So yeah, it is async, yeah. So now what we want to do is say await access. Now this will take in a path to the file, which is the first param, and then the second one we need to pass in the constants as an argument. So we need to say r_ok, which means is it able to be readable, the file? Does it have that permission? Now to get the file path, let's create a method get file path, unique file name. So if you see here, I have the images and I'm inside service. So the way we can do this is __ dir name, directory name. And now this will take us into, so the directory into, I believe, no, not server, it'll be service. Now we need to ... out of there, and we need to get inside the image one. All right, and then we need to append the unique file name. So now we can come in here and say get file path. And what is this? What is it not like? I'm going to say return string. Oh, got it. Unique file name. Okay. Access will not actually return anything. It doesn't exist. It's going to throw an error, actually. So it's interesting. So this will just be return true. If it doesn't throw any errors, then we just assume that it's existing. All right. So now what we can do up here, await this dot check if file exists, unique file name. Okay. This will come from the file response dot unique file name. Okay. So it's not liking something here. The reason why it's giving me that error is because of this. I didn't await it. I usually always forget to await that stuff. It's so super annoying that I get about myself. So if the file doesn't exist, we're gonna return false. And if it does exist, well, now we need to get the file contents, the binary. So we can call this method read file. All right. And we're going to make this async. I'm going to come down here. Private async read file data. Now, I do want to say one thing about this. Whenever you're downloading a file or reading a file, especially in your backend server, if you're reading a large file, remember this all gets stored into your memory. And if your memory is not high enough, then it could crash the server. Typically, I don't know, if you want to download large files, if you want to have the user to have that ability, if you want the user to have that ability, then you probably need to read the file in chunks and not the entire file. But if the file is like 20 megabytes or less, then the browser will have no problem, and your backend will have no problem. The browser will actually download it, I believe, into chunks at a time. If well, I'll show you guys that in a bit. But you just got to be careful in your backend. You don't want to overload the server. For this tutorial, let's just assume we're handling only 20 megabytes or less. I might make another video on how to do large files. I also want to make a video on how you stream a video, like how YouTube works, but that's a little bit down the road. I gotta figure out how that actually works. That's something really interesting though to me. So now, sorry guys, I got off on tangent. This read file, the first argument that we need to pass in is the file path. Okay, so we can easily reuse this get file path method. That's why I created it. And then this will have a callback with error or data. If error, we should console.log this. And then let's go ahead and reject this to be false. And then this will also have the ability to return the buffer of the file. This is what the data would be. So the data would be of type buffer. Error would be, well, yeah, that. Okay. So now we come in here and we say file data response is equal to await this dot read file data and then file response dot unique file name. So then we'll have one more check here. File data, yep. If it's false, then let's return false. Otherwise, we're going to simply return the buffer. So file data response and then the file name. File response, not unique file name, but the file name. Now, what will this return? This will return a promise, false, or an object. Okay, so this object will be file data of type buffer, or and as well as the file name string. Perfect, guys. So now we're in the controller. So in the controller, I'm going to call this method. Let's see here, file data response, right? Yeah, let's call this file details. File details equals to await file retrieval service dot download file, pass in that file ID. So now if the file details is equal to false, we're gonna bring this response in here, return it, and then we're gonna do a status of 404, meaning not found. Yeah, we were not able to locate the file, so that makes sense to me. Success is false, and we can have a message. File not found. Otherwise, all right, so this is the interesting part. We're going to call the response object. We're going to call this method here called write head. So this will take in the status code, and then the second param can be multiple of things. So we're going to pass in headers, and it's going to be of type outgoing HTTP headers, which will be an object. So the status code will be 200, which means it's okay. The request is good. Okay, so now in here, we're going to do two things, two properties here. So first thing, obviously, is going to be the content type. Now the content type, we want to set this not as application JSON. That's what we're used to. We want to set it as octet stream. Okay, that's what we use for file download, for the buffer. And then we need to do one more, guys. This is called the content disposition. And this is what tells the browser that there's an attachment, file attachment. Okay. So we do this attachment, and then we do file name in quotes, double quotes. And then I'm going to use template string to get the file details file name. Okay, so what is it not like here? Excuse me, but it does. Okay, I was like, excuse me, it does exist. I just didn't have the camel case. Now, We're not done there. We need to also say response.write. So we just wrote the header part. Now this is going to write the file data. So file data. So if you see here, it can take in a chunk of type any. So, it will take in the buffer. Now there's some other things that you can do here. So the response has a built-in download, and it will do, basically what I'm doing here. But I think I just wanted to show you guys how you actually do it, like explicitly without using a built-in method. If you wanted to use a built-in method, I think you could use download, or I think download is the one. Yeah. And then we're just going to do response.end. So just to recap, we get the content disposition and the content type. We write the file data, and then we get the response.end. One more thing we need to do, guys. So in our app.ts, if you guys are familiar with CORS, well, the browser will not expose this header by default. It will expose this one. If you try to access this one from the response object in the client side, it will not exist. So let me go ahead and show you that first so that you guys can see that. The backend should be done at this point, guys, which is good. So now inside of our file download service, let's go inside and let's create a method here. So we get the file back, the file response back. And now, what we want to do here, I'm just going to go ahead and console.log the file response. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. Okay, so if you see here, we get back this headers. Well, you can't really see what's inside the headers, so let's go ahead. Oh, but you know what? We did make the network call. Okay, so if you see here, perfect. Let me pop this out. This is like the raw data here of the file. And if you see in the headers, we have the content disposition, which is the file name that we need so that the user will download that as the file name. And then the content type as the octet stream. So now we want to access the headers. So the simple way we can do that is just say file response dot headers dot get. Okay, we have a get method that will let us access the properties inside the headers. And right now, the only thing exposed to us is the content type. And all I'm going to say here is if it's equal to application octet stream, then we know that we found the file and it exists and it's good to download. And what we're going to do now, we're basically, that buffer that we get returned is just a blob, or we need to convert that into a blob, that data, so that the browser knows what to do with that blob and download it. So I'm going to do this file response.blob, which is a method that you can use. So if you see here, you won't be able to see it, unfortunately, but there's a method in here that you can use that will convert the response into a blob. Okay, so once that's converted, we need to grab the file name. So this is where we need the content disposition. And I'm going to go ahead. This requires its own method because there's quite a bit that you have to do. You need to basically, let's see here, parse this string, this file name string. Sorry, you need to parse this content disposition string value. You need to find the file name, split it, and then grab this. So yeah, there's a little bit. We can do it all in one line, but it's kind of nasty. So I'm going to create a method here. Get file name from content disposition. Content disposition headers, and this is going to be of type headers, and this is going to return a string. And headers dot get content disposition Okay, so just for some testing, I wanted to show you guys. Right now we can just do that. Let's go ahead and just call this get file name. Okay. So now I'm going to click on the file. Let's go ahead and see. So if you see here, it returns null because it does not exist. Oh, sorry. It does not exist in the headers object because it's not, the browser is, it's like a security thing. So if you know about cores, especially the package that we use in the backend to allow requests to come in, here we need to add in something. For this sake, we need to write this key, exposed headers, and we need to add content disposition in here. Now, whenever the server returns the response, and it has that object key in there, and I click on, if you see here, now it's accessible. So yeah, cool little, hopefully you guys learned something new, because I certainly did. I spent like seriously like an hour. Like, why is it not in the response object? It literally exists there. And like everyone, we just Stack Overflow, and I found out that it needs to be accessible from your backend. So yeah, hopefully you guys learned that. And if you already knew that, good for you. I major props. Okay, so now with that being said, this will be the file name. And then we're just going to have a straight return because we're going to do this in one line. Now we get the content disposition. Now we need to parse that. And the way we're going to do that, so .split, we're going to use split. We're going to grab the file. So let me actually do this so you guys can see. And TypeScript doesn't like this because it might not be there. It might not exist. Oh, sorry. Actually, no, sorry. It's right now because it's not returning a string. All right, so file name, I'm going to say equal. And then this is going to return you know what? Let's do this. I want you guys to be able to see this instead of, me just kind of doing it. So let's store this in a URL. It's not really a URL, but at this point, that's fine. This is going to be a string like this. Now I'm going to do URL dot split. So if we do the file name equal, now we're going to want to access the first index property. Okay, so that why is it saying undefined? Oh, wait a minute. It didn't actually split it. I think it's because of this attachment and the way it is. Okay, let's do it in here. I'm going to console.log this. And then let's just return that. Okay, so now if you see here, TypeScript is saying this could be a potentially null, but we know that it won't be, but we need to keep that as optional. All right. So now if I click on that, all right guys, so I messed something up here. It should not be camel case. It should be like that. That's why it wasn't working in the console earlier. There we go. So now it's split up into two indexes in the array. So we're going to access the first element. And then if you see here, now we get the file name. But if you see here, there's an unnecessary extra quote here because in here, it's adding that. I guess it's because of how whenever the download file, disposition is maybe adding. I don't know. Super weird. So what we need to do now is call this replace method. And we're just going to say look for that and replace it with an empty. And then I'm also going to just do that. Whoops. Not like that. So 1 second, guys. This is hard to read. There we go. Let's go ahead and return this. Now this is saying string or undefined. So this could potentially be undefined. And if it is, we're just going to return an empty string. All right. Now, we could add in some validation if it's an empty string, return false. Let's go ahead and do that. Return false. Now, we need to create a method to download the file. This is just like, one step unraveling at a time. So I'm going to create a method here called download file. This will take in the file name and then the blob object. And this should work in all browsers. The actual download part, the UI, I'm not sure because I use Flexbox, so I know how IE is about that, especially with using the column direction. So I'm going to create a URL variable, and I'm going to use the window.url create object URL method. And then I'm going to pass in the blog there. So it's going to create a URL with me for me of that blob. And I'm going to say, so this is for IE. For those of you that care about IE, let's see, version. So from the navigator object, we're going to say if its index of Trident is not equal to -1. Okay, if the index of will return a -1 if it's not found. So then that means it's not IE. We need to use the method from the navigator object called saveBlob, where we pass in the blob and then the file name. And then return. Now, if it's not IE, which most of us should be not on, we will create an DOM element. Create element. We're going to create the A tag inside the, so this element is just an object at this point. We're going to assign it the URL to the href property. And then we're going to say element.download is equal to file name. This is like the download attribute, and you pass in the file name so that it will, whenever you download it, it will actually name that file as the file name we give. And then we're going to say click. So now, if you know, in React, we should never manipulate the DOM ourselves. And that's exactly what we're not doing here. We are not adding anything to the DOM. We are simply just creating the object. And that's it. That's really it. Now, if we were actually, this would be actually manipulating the DOM, which is not what we want to do. All right, so just wanted to clear that up for you guys if you had doubts about that. Now I'm going to call this download file, and I'm going to pass in the file name and the blob. And then I spelled it wrong. And then at that point, we should just return true because there shouldn't be any issues. Okay, guys, so let's give this a try. And yeah, let's give this a try. Done a lot of coding. Ha! Perfect. It worked on the first try. That's usually never happens. All right. Cool, guys. So that's working. Let's just try this. Perfect. And if you see here, it's, naming the file as we want it. Of course, if there's duplicates, then I think the browser will name it again by adding that one. You guys know how that works. Okay. Now let's go ahead and add a toast message saying, hey, your file was downloaded, or if it failed, then your file failed. We're going to import the toast. Oh my goodness. method here, create standalone toast. This is what I really like about Chakra. I don't really have to implement any component. It does it for you. You just pass in the params. Create standalone toast. And toast is just going to be a method we call, where we pass in the title. And this will be true or false. And we're just going to say download successful. Download failed. Now, we are returning JSON messages from the backend. So if you guys wanted to use the backend server messages, you could definitely do that. The way you could do that is check here if it's application/JSON. And if it is, return the message. Yeah, pretty easy. Status that we need to pass in. So file download response. And this just determines the color of the toast. Duration, let's do 3,000. 3 seconds, I believe. Is closable, is true. Okay. All right, guys, this should be the final test. Perfect. So last thing I'm going to show you is, let me go ahead and upload a large video. I believe this is like 300 megabytes. Now, I tried downloading it and it worked. It will download it in chunks. So let's go ahead and try this. But you see there's a delay in the response, right? It's quite a bit of a delay. And it will work. Yeah. So you see that delay right there. So the best thing, I think, that from what I read and understand, is whenever you return the file blob data stream, you need to return that in pretty much chunks so that you're not overloading the server. And also the browser. The browser took a while too. So yeah, guys, that's it. That's really it. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video and got some value out of it, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It will help out the channel a great ton and also inspire me to keep making more videos. Thank you guys so much again. See you next time. Bye bye.